Well, let's talk about food. I've seen this happen firsthand. I mentioned I was in a scenario in a hurricane where the grocery store shelves were completely emptied out. And in some stores in the Houston area currently, things aren't even bad at all, but the grocery stores are running out of certain items like the water, and in some stores the toilet paper is just completely cleaned out, right? So prepare yourself for food. Now, my advice here is buy what you're already going to eat. But buy what you're already going to eat because you're going to spend the money on it anyway, but try to pick things that have longer shelf life. So kind of as an example here, canned goods, you can get canned goods and they're going to last. They're going to be good. Most canned goods, if they're properly canned, I mean, if you do your own canning, 5 years, you can get 10 years out of a canned good. So they're going to last a really long time. And so we actually have a pantry in our house that's basically ration. We call it the emergency food stash because we ration canned goods into home for several months in case something ever were to happen. So canned goods is one element that you can do. Things like dried fruits, and so dehydrate. If you got a food dehydrator, you can do your own or you can buy them. But dried meats like beef jerky. There's a company I really like for this. They do several kinds, but it's non-processed. So what you don't want to be is like in this scenario where you are panicked and you didn't prepare, and now you're running to Stop and Go or 7-Eleven and you're picking up like the Slim Jim stuff that's full of like genetically modified soy and horrific, MSG. Like, you don't want to be in a scenario where the world is in a panic around you, and now you're relying on garbage food to keep your wits about you. So again, plan now. But company I like for this is Nick Sticks. They've got turkey, they've got beef, they've got chicken. So whatever your options are, they've got a good varieties of dried meats, and if you stock up on those, that's a smart thing to do as an emergency ration. And if all this passes over and you don't need it, well, you can put one in your lunch every day, or you can eat one every day as a component to your regular diet and not feel like you just bought a bunch of stuff that you're never going to eat. Other things that you want to consider for longer shelf life, if you tolerate them well too, is nuts and certain seeds. I like pumpkin seed. It's very nutritionally dense and generally very easy to digest and very easily tolerated. But nuts are a great source of calories. They're a great source of fat. So if we're talking about stocking up on them, they go a long way, and they'll take you a long way because they're high caloric. And so again, planning for your food allows you to not be at the mercy of what's left over in the grocery store should something go awry. Some people jokingly suggested last time that the gluten-free food aisle in the grocery store is always still full, even in an emergency. And I would say that food is that's junk anyway. But if you plan ahead, you don't have to worry about whether or not what's available you're also allergic to. Like, you're not picking the worst thing just so that you don't starve. I was in a situation like that a number of years ago in California when the power in the whole city went out and all the cell service went out. Nobody knew what happened, and we were without power for about 24 hours, without service for 24 hours. So nobody knew whether there was some kind of attack or some kind of power grid failure, because there was no way to get news to anybody, and everybody inside the city was panicking looking for food. That's a bad situation to be in. If you ever want to be in an unpredictable environment that gets very dangerous very quickly, it's when people run out of food and they don't know where they're going to get it, and they will fight for it, and they will fight over it. They will trample people over it. So plan for this. And this way you have plenty, you've stocked up, you don't have to worry about what you're going to eat, and you don't have to worry about potentially eating things that aren't good for you or eating things that you're allergic to. If you're trying to follow the no grain, no pain protocol, you can do this intelligently and still stick with the protocol and maintain your health despite the fact that emergency might be going on around you. Okay, so food. Again, canned goods, dried fruits and nuts and meats. Make sure, again, we're looking for high quality. We're looking for organic. We're not cutting the rules just because we're stocking emergency food here. We're still following the same rules of organic, grass-fed, etc. Now, one other tip I can give you in this category is if you have a deep freeze, is to fill it up. Just fill it up with good quality meats. There's A couple of great companies that I recommend if you don't have local stores that carry grass-fed beef. We can pump a link up, a resource link into the feed for those of you who don't have like a local Whole Foods or a store that carries, grass-fed, grass-finished types of things. But if you've got a deep freezer, you can fill it full of meats, frozen goods, frozen vegetables, and things of that nature. What that does is, let's just say worst case scenario, the power does go out, which I don't really suspect is going to happen with a virus. So that's more likely to happen in an emergency like fires or emergency like a hurricane or something along that line. But if it does go out, if something happens where you were going to lose power, that freezer, if it's full of frozen things, it will keep cooler longer. So you'll actually have food to eat daily, and it'll sustain you. I mean, that cold meat in that freezer will keep things cold in that freezer for a couple of weeks. So you'll have a couple of weeks of actual good, real food that you can sustain yourself or your family off of. If you've got a deep freeze and it's virtually empty, once the power goes out, that thing's going to cool. It's going to warm up really, really fast. But if it's full of frozen meat, it's going to take a much longer period of time for all of that to thaw out. So if you fill it up, it's going to take you, a good 7 to 10 days, and it won't really, the food in it won't go bad. You'll still be able to eat it. So again, think about stocking that freezer for that type of scenario. So that's kind of the gentle nudge for you to get food prepared, because when your food goes south, your brain goes south, your health goes south. And if we're trying to deal with an entity that can destroy your health, now it puts you at a disadvantage to be able to maintain your health through this. So let's also talk about what you should be focused on doing right now. So a lot of people are just in panic mode, and I don't think anybody really needs to panic, not at this point. It's too soon for that. It's too soon to be scared. But what you want to be focused on, and I talked a little bit more in depth about this, is just eating real food, is just eating good food, taking care of yourself, eating healthy. You want to be focused on getting adequate sleep. You want to be focused on where, if we're coming into spring, so hopefully spring just ends this whole viral escapade, and then we can all just laugh about it, a year from now. But you want to get out and get as much fresh air and sunshine as you can. You want to make sure you're moving, you're staying moving, your body's moving. Don't be sedentary in a dark room where you're not getting that movement. Remember, movement circulates your lymphatic fluids, and that's a big part of how your immune system functions and works. Excuse me. So these are things that you should just be focusing on currently, is just taking care of yourself, like getting the things done that need to be done by taking care of yourself first. Nothing is the better offense against the coronavirus or any other virus for that matter than just good recipe for taking care of yourself. So make sure you're applying these just kind of basic fundamental things. Okay, what should you be avoiding right now? If we're talking about avoidance of things. So the number one thing you should be avoiding, aside from junk food, alcohol and sugar. These are two things that have known immune damaging properties. They will actually overwhelm your immune system and put you at a disadvantage. So shouldn't be getting drunk, and you shouldn't be eating a ton of sugar. Some people say, well, I'm really stressed and the alcohol helps with the stress. Well, know that while it helps with your stress, it's also going to help suppress your immune system. So you want to be real careful about that at this point in time. Now, additionally, I think many of you following me already know this. This should be a no-brainer, but avoiding gluten, obviously gluten, especially those of you with the gluten sensitivity issue, you don't want to get stuck in a scenario where you didn't plan here, and so now all that's left is foods that contain that, and so now you're in a real pickle. The other thing you want to avoid right now is eating out. Now, if you own a restaurant, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to run you out of business, but the reality is this. We've got a major pandemic of a virus that spreads rather easily, and eating out is one of the quickest ways to get communicable disease. So when you're eating out, 16-year-olds, how well do they wash their hand? Those are the people that are serving your food. 16, 18-year-olds, young kids. Even at major restaurants where maybe they're not young kids, but Now you're talking about a mass mingling of germs and the potential for sharing. So again, if you're trying to minimize your exposure to food-induced immunosuppression or immune problems, then eating out right now is not probably in your best interest. So again, if you own a restaurant, I apologize, but I've got to give advice that's right for people for the right reasons. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.